The transport from the Accord's orbital station to the Sorath, Sovereignty's primary diplomatic reception, took 40 minutes, and Ambassador Thale used 37 of them for the briefing. Cashin Vell sat across from the ambassador in the transport's briefing configuration. The specific, forward-facing arrangement of the diplomatic transport's interior that communicated the register of a working session rather than a transit, and received the briefing with the professional quality that 6 years of cultural division work had built. The professional quality of reception was complete attention, systematic retention, the pattern-finding habit that noted not only the content of briefing points, but the quality with which they were delivered, which was frequently more informative than the content. The briefing had 17 points. 16 of them were the standard operational parameters of a senior diplomatic gathering. The seating arrangement protocol, the formal sequence of the reception's official program, the specific individuals whose attentions required active management, the 3 policy discussions that would actually be conducted in the reception's margins despite the occasion being nominally social in character. Cashin received them with the completeness that the standard required. The 17th point was different in its delivery quality. Ambassador Thale had been managing the Accord-Sorath relationship for 7 years with the specific, tightly organized quality of someone who had built a complex diplomatic relationship through continuous, careful attention to every variable. He was not a person who delivered briefing points with unnecessary weight. His professional style was the precise allocation of emphasis to the points that required it, and the neutral delivery of the points that did not, which was the style of someone who understood that overemphasis was as misleading as underemphasis, and who had been in enough diplomatic contexts to know the difference. The 17th point was delivered with weight. Do not approach, do not initiate eye contact, do not begin any communication with, and if communication is initiated toward you, do not engage beyond the minimum required by basic courtesy, Princess Yara Sorath. Cashin noted the delivery quality. He noted the specificity of the instruction, not the general caution that briefings sometimes included about sensitive diplomatic figures, but the specific, enumerated list of prohibited actions, which was the format of a briefing point that had been refined through use rather than constructed for the first time. He noted the quality with which Thale delivered it, which was the quality of something said before. She attended the last 3 gatherings, Cashin said. The previous 2 briefings didn't include a specific warning about her. Thale looked at him. The previous 2 she attended as the secondary royal representative. The succession was clarified 8 months ago. She is now the primary heir. He paused. The primary heir's position carries a different protocol weight. What changed about her that changes the protocol weight? Cashin said. Thale made the specific, assessing pause of someone deciding how much to say within the available time and context. Her presence produces effects on people in her proximity, he said. The effects are documented in the Sorath Sovereignty's court records. The documentation is available to the Accord's diplomatic division's senior personnel. The effects are not always predictable. The court's protocols around her contact with delegation personnel from allied civilizations are the court's response to the documentation. He looked at Cashin with the full 7-year relationship quality. The 17th point is the most important of the 17. What kind of effects? Cashin said. The kind that are in the documentation, Thale said with the quality of a closed subject. Cashin filed the 17th point. He filed it in the specific, complete way that he filed all 17 points. Not as a list to be checked against, but as a map of the terrain, the information about where the significant things were and what they required. He filed the 17th point's content and the 17th point's delivery quality and the 17th point's position in the briefing sequence, which was last, which was the position of the thing you wanted to remain most present in the person receiving it. The transport arrived at the Sorath Sovereignty's primary diplomatic hall. The hall had the quality of the Sorath aesthetic, which was the aesthetic of a civilization that had developed, across a very long time, the conviction that significant spaces communicated through restraint. The walls were the specific material of the Sorath formal tradition, a composite whose surface quality changed with the ambient light, shifting incrementally through the day's progression in a way that was not dramatic, but that produced the specific, accumulated effect of a space that was responsive to its own context. The arrangement of the hall was the arrangement of the annual gathering's formal configuration. the 11 allied and affiliated civilization delegations in their designated positions, the Sorath court's senior members at the central position, the service infrastructure managed by the reception's operations personnel with the invisible efficiency that well-managed service infrastructure produced. Cashin managed the margin work. This was his function and his default, the specific, quiet competence of someone whose professional role was the support of senior diplomatic personnel and whose support was most effective when it was least visible. He managed the seating arrangement's third table documentation, the equipment inventory for the policy discussion sessions that would happen in the margins, the communication protocol confirmations between the Accord's delegation and the reception's operations management. He did this with the presence in a room that was the specific quality of someone who had cultivated the ability to be present without being observed, the cultivated invisibility of someone whose observation required not being observed. He was good at this. People forgot he was there. He had made his peace with this in year 4. In the reception's second hour, while managing the equipment inventory documentation at the third table, he became aware, in the peripheral, comprehensive quality of someone who had spent 6 years developing peripheral awareness as a professional standard, that the hall's ambient quality had changed. Not suddenly, not dramatically. The specific, subtle quality of a shift in an environment's register, the way that a room's quality changed when something in it changed that was not immediately visible, but that was registered by the cumulative attention of everyone in the room simultaneously. He looked toward the source. Princess Yara Sorath had entered the hall. She was 29 years old, the Sorath sovereignty's primary heir for 8 months, and she moved through the reception hall with a quality that Cashin's 6 years of cultural division work in significant diplomatic spaces had not produced a prior instance of. Not the composed quality of someone performing the formal occasions required register. Not the institutional quality of a royal representative conducting an official function. The quality of someone whose presence in a space had a specific physical character, not threatening, not aggressive, but dense in the specific way that proximity to a significant gradient was dense. The way that certain natural phenomena communicated their nature through the quality of the air around them rather than through any visible expression of it. She was tall. She had the Sorath physical characteristic, the pointed ears, sharp and precise through dark hair dressed in the Sorath formal style, which was the style of the specific occasion, and also in some quality he could not immediately categorize, not entirely of the formal occasion. The quality of someone for whom the formal style was worn rather than inhabited. She moved through the hall with the patient attention of someone looking for something, the specific, directed quality of a search that had a known object rather than the general scanning of someone orienting to a new space. The court personnel around her had the specific, intensified quality of people whose function included monitoring the behavior of the person they were monitoring, and who were doing it with the heightened attention of protocols recently strengthened. He noted all of this in the peripheral quality and returned to the equipment inventory documentation. He was 12 entries into the inventory when he became aware, in the peripheral quality, that something had changed in his immediate vicinity. He looked up. She was standing 3 meters away, not at the Accord's primary delegation table, not at the position that the seating arrangements protocol designated for the Sorath sovereignty's royal representative. 3 meters from the third table where the Accord's junior cultural attaché was managing the equipment inventory documentation. She was looking at him, not at the documentation, not at the table, at him. At Cashin Vel, whom people forgot was there. She was looking at him with the quality of someone whose search had arrived at its object. The specific, clear quality of recognition. Not the recognition of familiarity from official contexts, but the recognition of something more specific and more personal. She walked to the table. She sat in the chair beside him. The diplomatic reception hall went very quiet. He did not move. He was aware in the comprehensive peripheral quality of the full configuration of the hall's response. The 240 delegation members and court personnel and reception operations staff whose attention had, in the 3 seconds it took the princess to cross to the table and sit, redirected entirely to the third table, and the junior cultural attaché and the sovereignty's primary heir sitting beside him. He was aware of Ambassador Thale's expression at the primary delegation table, the rapid, professional assessment quality, the 7-year relationship management quality applied to an immediate problem. He was aware of the Sarath Court's senior protocol officer moving through the hall's periphery with the contained urgency of someone crossing a room without crossing it urgently. He did not move. He did not speak. He applied the professional training of 6 years to the situation of not knowing what the professional training had designed for this situation. Because the professional training had not designed for this situation. Because no training was designed for this situation. Because this situation was not in the documented range of situations that diplomatic reception margin work produced. She looked at him. "You were on Verath Station's secondary platform," she said. Her voice had the quality of someone saying something they had been carrying for a long time, and that had become, in the saying, simultaneously lighter and heavier. 14 months ago, the Herath incursion's third day. The translation system in his ear rendered it in the clean quality of a near-complete translation. The Sarath formal language converted to the Accord's common register with the specific, slight quality of a translation that was very good, and that was not perfect. "Yes," he said. "Section 7, she said, the Eastern Maintenance Corridor." "Yes," he said. 4 civilians in the Eastern Maintenance Corridor when the incursion force's secondary unit reached the platform's lower levels," she said. "Yes," he said. 3 of them were Sarath sovereignty citizens," she said. "At the platform for the Trade Summit's secondary sessions, one of them was not wearing identification." He looked at her. "The one not wearing identification," she said, "was in the Eastern Maintenance Corridor because the primary evacuation route had been compromised in the incursion's second day. And the secondary route was the only available route, and the secondary route went through Section 7. "Yes," he said. "The Accord's junior cultural attaché managing the Trade Summit's logistical documentation had been in Section 7 because the logistical documentation required physical verification of the secondary session's equipment inventory," she said. "The inventory was stored in Section 7's maintenance access." "Yes," he said. "He found the 4 civilians," she said. "He guided them through the secondary route's damaged sections to the platform's emergency extraction point." She was looking at him with the full, direct quality throughout, the quality of someone who had been in this moment before, in the version that had been building for 13 months, and who was in the actual version of it now with the complete attention of someone for whom the actual version mattered. The extraction point's capacity was 4. There were 5 people. The hall was completely still around them. "The junior cultural attaché put the 4 civilians in the extraction point," she said. "He remained in Section 7. The secondary extraction arrived 40 minutes later." "Yes," he said. "One of the 4 civilians in the first extraction," she said, "was not wearing identification. The extraction point's registration was manual, requiring the section's access code. The access code was in the logistical documentation's equipment inventory records. The junior cultural attaché registered the 4 civilians in the secondary extraction queue and removed himself from the queue." He looked at her. "He removed himself from the queue," she said, "and waited 40 minutes in Section 7 during the Herath incursion's third day on Verath Station's secondary platform." "The secondary extraction was queued," he said. "The queue was processing, 40 minutes was the timeline." "Yes," she said. "I know. I read the emergency management system's documentation in the second month after Verath Station." She looked at him. "The documentation shows the secondary extraction was queued for registered platform personnel. The documentation shows the registration was manual at the Section 7 terminal. The documentation shows the access code was a 6-digit sequence, not in the standard public documentation." She paused. "You had the code because it was in the equipment inventory records you were managing. You used the code to register 4 people you had just met in a maintenance corridor, and you removed yourself from the queue and waited 40 minutes. The capacity was 4, he said. There were 5 people I had the code." She looked at him. "You are describing the most significant thing that has happened to me in 29 years of living," she said, "as a capacity calculation." "At the time," he said, "it was a capacity calculation. The math was straightforward." "At the time," she said, "and after." He looked at the table. He looked at the reception hall and the 240 people, and the equipment inventory documentation that had been sitting undone for approximately 5 minutes. He looked at the Sarath Sovereignty's primary heir sitting beside him in the chair she had chosen, and who had been carrying 13 months of documentation and recognition, and who was asking him what had happened to the filing after the 40 minutes in Section 7. After, he said carefully, I returned to the 40 minutes more than the filing suggested I should. What do you mean? She said. The filing was, successful managed wait in a crisis situation concluded without losses, operationally significant at the minimum threshold. He paused. If the filing had been accurate, the returning to them would have been proportionate to that significance. The returning was not proportionate. Why not? She said. Because of the quality, he said. The specific quality of the 40 minutes. Something I have been filing under completed action waiting produces a specific quality of clarity. The parameters defined, the available actions defined, the outcome either happening or not happening. I filed the 40 minutes under that category. She was very still. The category was not wrong, he said. It was insufficient. He looked at her. In 6 years of significant diplomatic spaces in high-stakes waiting situations, the filing had never returned to me. The 40 minutes kept returning. The clarity kept returning. I did not have a sufficient explanation for why Section 7's version of the clarity was different from the standard completed action waiting quality. She looked at him with the full quality, the recognition and the patience and the 13 months and the thing underneath all of them. Until this morning, she said. The 17th briefing point, he said. Yes. The effects, she said. The effects, he said, which are documented and which are the reason for the protocols. He looked at her. The effects the documentation describes, I did not experience those in Section 7. No, she said, I experienced the clarity, he said. Yes, she said, which is a different effect, he said. Which is, she said, the other kind. The hall was very quiet, not the held-breath stillness of the moment she had sat down. The different quiet of a room that is watching something, and that has been watching it long enough that the watching has settled into the specific, attentive quality of people who understand that what they are watching is significant, and who are giving it the attention that significance requires. The other kind, he said, you mentioned it. Yes, she said, the oldest records, he said. You mentioned the oldest records. She looked at him with the quality of someone who had been carrying the oldest records for 13 months, and who was, in the reception hall at the third table with the 240 people watching, arriving at the moment where the carrying became the telling. The Sorath sovereignty's court records contain documentation of the effects going back 9 generations, she said. The documentation is thorough, and the management protocols are built on its thoroughness. The effects are real, and the protocols are appropriate responses to them. Yes, he said. In the documentation, she said, there is one reference to the other kind, one, in 9 generations of thorough documentation. A reference in the oldest records, the 4th generation, which was the sovereignty's consolidation period, to an individual in proximity to the heir at that time who experienced not the disruptive effects but a different quality. The clarity quality, he said. The records use a different term, she said. The archaic formal register, the translation is approximate, the term renders as, she paused. The term renders as the recognition quality. The quality produced in a specific individual, not in the general population in proximity, but in one specific individual by the heir's presence. One specific individual in 9 generations, he said. One documented, she said. The consolidation period's record gaps are significant. There may have been others. The documentation that survives shows one. And the records describe the quality, he said. Yes, she said. The description is specific and consistent with what you described. The clarity, the parameters defined, the available actions defined, the specific quality of a situation that is what it is without the pressure of the stakes producing the usual texture. She paused. The records call it the recognition quality because, she paused again, because the oldest records describe it as what happens when the heir's presence encounters the presence of someone whose quality. She stopped. The archaic formal register has a term. The current translation renders it as the one who fits. He looked at her. The one who fits, he said. Yes, she said. The records describe this as a specific quality, he said. Produced in a specific individual. Yes, she said. Not a category, not a type, a specific individual recognition. She looked at him. The records are 4 generations old, the language is archaic. The translation is approximate. She looked at the reception hall, the 240 people, the sky outside the viewport, the diplomatic occasion continuing in its slightly altered ambient quality around them. The description of the quality is specific. The quality you described from Section 7 is the quality the description describes. He was quiet for a moment. He sat with this the way he sat with significant information, fully, without filling the space around it, letting it be what it was until the shape of what it required became visible. What it required, the accurate picture given to the people who were making decisions based on the incomplete version. The court, he said. The protocols, they're built on the documentation of the disruptive effects. Yes, she said. The oldest records, the recognition quality, the one who fits, that's not in the current documentation. No, she said. The consolidation period's record gaps. The information didn't survive into the working documentation that the current protocols are built on. Then the protocols are managing a partial picture, he said. She looked at him. The protocols were designed to protect you, he said. Correctly based on the documentation they had, but the documentation they had was incomplete. He looked at her steadily. The protocols as currently designed are applying the management framework for the disruptive effects to all contact, including contact that produces the recognition quality, which is not the same thing. No, she said. It is not the same thing. The court needs the accurate picture, he said. She was quiet for a moment. The oldest records are in the personal archive, she said. The personal archive is private documentation. The disclosure to the court is a formal institutional process. Yes, he said. I read the archival disclosure protocols on the transport. She looked at him. Standard preparation, he said. I read the governance documentation section. The governance documentation section, she said. Yes, he said. It included the archival disclosure protocols. She looked at him for a moment with the quality he had been reading since she sat down, the direct, patient recognition quality. And something underneath it that was the quality of someone finding, in the person across from them. Something that the 13 months of carrying the oldest records had been building toward, and that was, in the reception hall at the third table, arriving. You read the governance documentation section as standard preparation for a diplomatic reception, she said. I read everything available, he said. That's the standard. The archival disclosure procedure, she said, the formal process. It requires a formal request from the heir to the Archive Council, he said. A statement of the disclosure's relevance to current policy decisions. The Archive Council reviews the statement before the materials are made available for formal consideration. He paused. The statement writes itself. The court's protocols are current policy decisions. The oldest records contain information directly relevant to the protocol's application. The relevance is not ambiguous. She looked at him for a long moment. You arrived at this conclusion, she said, in the duration of this conversation. I had the governance documentation from the transport, he said. The procedure was already present. The conversation provided the relevant application. The conversation, she said, which was 13 months in the building, he said. She was quiet. You sat beside me, he said, in a diplomatic reception with 240 people watching. You had been carrying the oldest records for 13 months, and you sat beside me because the context was available and the 13 months had been enough. Yes, she said, the context was not what you had in mind, he said. No, she said, but it was available. Yes, he said, and the 13 months had been enough. She looked at him. The recognition quality, she said, the one who fits. The records describe it as mutual, the quality produced in the one who fits by the heir's presence. And she paused. The quality produced in the heir by the presence of the one who fits. What quality, he said. The same quality, she said. The clarity, the specific quality of a situation whose parameters are defined and whose available actions are defined and whose outcome is either going to happen or not going to happen. She looked at him. In 29 years of the heir's position, first as the secondary representative, then as the primary, in every formal occasion and every managed diplomatic space, and every context the protocols were designed for and the protocols were applied to, I have not had the clear quality. He was quiet. In Section 7, she said. In the 40 minutes. In a maintenance corridor during an incursion with the platform's structural integrity uncertain and the emergency management queue processing and 4 people in the extraction holding space. She looked at him, the clear quality. Yes, he said, the same quality. Mutual, she said. Yes, he said, the filing was insufficient. She looked at him, she looked at the reception hall. She looked at the equipment inventory documentation sitting undone on the table, the margin work that had been sitting since she sat down. The formal process, she said. The Archive Council, the statement of relevance. Yes, he said. The disclosure will require the court's full formal session, she said. The Archive Council's review, the protocol officer's assessment of the disclosure's implications for the existing protocols. Yes, he said. The formal process has a timeline. The timeline is in the governance documentation. She looked at him. You read the timeline, she said. It was in the governance documentation section, he said. Of course it was, she said. With the quality that he was coming to understand was the quality of someone receiving the accurate version, and finding it both surprising and entirely consistent with everything that had preceded it. She looked at the hall one more time. The 240 people, the sky outside, the diplomatic occasion that had continued in its altered ambient quality around the third table for the duration of this conversation. Coordinator Yeth will be at this table in approximately 90 seconds, she said. He has been managing the 90 seconds since I sat down. Yes, he said. I know, I've been watching him. I know you have, she said. He looked at her. The peripheral quality, she said. The comprehensive observation. I have been watching you observe the room since I sat down. She looked at him. You observe the room by not appearing to observe it. People forget you are there. Yes, he said. I did not forget you were there, she said. No, he said, you didn't. For 13 months, she said. I have not been able to forget you were in Section 7. He looked at her. He looked at the 13 months and the 40 minutes and the capacity calculation and the oldest records and the Archive Council's formal process and Coordinator Yeth approaching at the appropriate professional pace. He looked at the Sorath sovereignty's primary heir who had sat beside him in a diplomatic reception with 240 people watching, because the context was available and the 13 months had been enough, and who was about to manage Coordinator Yeth and the court's protocol response and the Archive Council and the disclosure and the formal process with the specific, patient quality of someone who had been managing significant things for 29 years and who had, in the 40 minutes in Section 7 and the 13 months since, been carrying something that the management framework had not had a category for. The disclosure, he said. When you present the statement of relevance to the Archive Council, the statement needs to describe the recognition quality in terms the Council's current documentation framework can assess. The archaic register's terminology will require a translation brief, she said. Yes, he said. The cultural database has a section on Sorath archaic formal register translation challenges. I read it on the transport. She looked at him. You read the archaic formal register translation challenges section, she said. It was in the cultural documentation, he said. Of course it was, she said. Coordinator Yeth arrived at the table. Ambassador Thale arrived at the table 11 minutes after Coordinator Yeth, which was the duration of Coordinator Yeth's initial management of the situation, the professional assessment, the exchange with the princess, the specific calculation of someone who had spent 9 years in protocol management, and who had, in the 11 minutes, arrived at the conclusion that his 9 years were insufficient precedent for the current configuration, and that the current configuration was going to require new precedent. Thale arrived with the 7-year relationship quality and the quality of someone who had been managing the 17th briefing points violation for 54 minutes, and who had decided that the management required his direct presence. He addressed the princess with the formal courtesy that the situation required. Your Highness, I hope the reception has been productive. She looked at him. Ambassador Thale, I have been speaking with your attaché about a matter of some complexity. I would like, with your delegation's cooperation, to arrange a formal follow-up meeting in the appropriate official context. The matter, Thale said, with the quality of someone asking a question to which they were not certain they wanted the answer, involves information relevant to the Sorath sovereignty's court protocols and the Accord-Sorath diplomatic relationships' ongoing management, she said. Specifically, the discovery of archival documentation with direct relevance to existing management protocols that have been operating on incomplete information. She paused. I believe you will find the meeting worthwhile. Thale looked at her. He looked at Cashin. He looked at the 54 minutes and the 240 people and the 17th briefing point and the specific, comprehensive quality of a diplomatic situation that had moved well beyond the parameters of the 17-point briefing. We would be honored, he said. I will have my attaché coordinate the arrangements. He looked at Cashin when he said it. Cashin received the look with the professional quality and the 6 years, and the equipment inventory documentation sitting undone at the third table, and the margin work that had become, in the 54 minutes, the most significant margin work of his career. "Of course," he said, "I'll manage the coordination." The princess looked at him when he said it. Not the performance of a look, the full, direct quality of someone who had been looking at him with the recognition quality since Section 7, in every version of the looking that the 13 months had produced, and who was looking at him now in the reception hall with the full quality present without management. "The coordination," she said. "Yes," he said. "You will manage it," she said. "Yes," he said. "Thoroughly," she said. "I read everything available," he said. "That's the standard." She looked at him for one more moment, then she stood. She looked at Coordinator Yeth. "After the reception," she said, "the Archive Council, I intend to present the statement of relevance. I will need your assistance with the formal process initiation." Yeth looked at her with the 9 years of protocol management and the new precedent quality. "Yes, Your Highness," he said. She looked at Cashin. "The margin work," she said. "Yes," he said. "You said it's where the actual work is," she said. "Usually," he said. "Then we will begin there," she said. She left the table. The reception continued. He returned to the equipment inventory documentation. The specific, quiet competence of someone managing the margin work that had been sitting undone for 54 minutes. And that was, in the continuation, the same margin work it had always been, and also something more than it had been. The way that things were the same and more than they had been when the context that contained them had changed. He managed it with the standard quality. At the reception's end, he sent the formal coordination request to the princess's court aide. The request covered the appropriate venue, the appropriate documentation format, the relevant governance procedure citations, the archival disclosure timeline from the governance documentation, the translation brief references for the archaic formal register's terminology, and the specific, sequential outline of the formal process as he had read it on the transport in the standard preparation. The request was thorough. In the margin of the supporting documentation, the specific space at the bottom of the formal coordination format that was not an official field, but that existed in the format's design as the space for supplementary notation, he wrote. "I read the archival protocols. The formal process is manageable. The statement of relevance writes itself. I will manage the coordination with the standard quality." He sent it. The response arrived 11 minutes later. The formal section was in the Sorath sovereignty's official language, translated cleanly by the system. The coordination is noted. The formal process is acknowledged. The Archive Council session has been requested for the day following the reception's conclusion. The statement of relevance has been drafted and is attached for the Accord delegation's review. The attached statement was thorough. It cited the archival records by their specific catalog reference. It described the recognition quality with the precision of someone who had been thinking about the accurate description for 13 months, and who had, in the reception hall, found the language for it in the conversation at the third table. It connected the recognition quality to the current protocol framework's documented basis with the specific, clear logic of an argument that knew its own ground. The statement, as he had said, wrote itself. Below the formal section of the response, in a register that was not the formal register, and that the translation system rendered with the slight, clean quality of personal communication accurately translated. The translation brief you referenced is the correct one. The archaic register's terminology is approximate in the current rendering. The approximation is sufficient for the Council's review. The accuracy is in the description, not the terminology. And then, below that, in a different quality again, the quality of something that was not the formal register and was not the personal professional register, but was the register of the recognition quality, the oldest records register. The register of something that had been true for 40 minutes in Section 7, and for 13 months since, and that was, in the coordination response's final line, being given the language it had been building toward. He stayed, he read it. He read it again. He looked at the notation, the 2 words in the translation system's rendering, the archaic formal register approximated in the current translation, the 4-generation-old margin notation given its current application in the coordination response's final line. He stayed, he looked at it for a long time with the quality he brought to all significant information. The full, patient attention, the not filling of the space around it, the letting it be what it was, accurate. He had stayed in Section 7. He had stayed in the transport's briefing. He had stayed at the third table for 54 minutes in full view of 240 people. He had stayed in the formal coordination and the thorough documentation, and the archival protocols from the governance documentation section, and the translation brief for the archaic register, and the margin of the supporting documentation. He stayed. It was what the margin work was for. It had always been what the margin work was for. He closed the coordination response. He filed it in the appropriate folder. He opened the Archive Council Sessions preparation documentation, the specific, thorough work of the formal process initiation, the timeline from the governance documentation, the statement of relevance review, the translation brief preparation, and he began it with the standard quality. Thorough, because I read everything available, was the standard preparation, and the standard preparation was the beginning of the management, and the management was the work, and the work was, as it had always been, in Section 7 and in the margin work, and in everything that mattered and in everything that was going to matter worth doing. The oldest records described the recognition as mutual. Mutual was the beginning, and the beginning, as all the significant beginnings had been, was exactly where the actual work started.